Hi, I'm Eliza F. I'm in the class of 2015, and I'm here to talk to you about my three-breath philosophy. So as many of you know, I grew up in Maine, and in Maine there's this little lake, and it's called Lake McGunnicook, and it's surrounded by the forest and these big cliffs and rocks, and it's beautiful, and it's always been home to me. And when I was 9 or 10 years old, I was hiking with my brother up this trail we used to call Fernald's Neck. And it takes 2 or 3 hours to get there. And finally, after this long hike, we ended up on the clearing on this big rock. And I remember I wanted nothing more than to go swimming. And I walked out to the edge of the rock and looked down and realized that I was 10 feet above the water. And being 4 feet tall, it was horrifying. And I knew that the longer I stood on the edge of the cliff, the more I was convinced I wasn't going to be able to do it. So I gave myself 3 breaths. And on the first breath, I breathed in the present moment. I breathed in the way the air felt on my skin and how warm it was and how lucky I am to be alive. And I breathed out all the distractions, all the worries about the past, all the worries about the future, everything that wasn't being mindful and being centered. And so in that Zen state, I took my next breath, which is trust. And not trust that the leap of faith literally would end well, but that it would end with exactly what I needed, that I would learn something from it and that I would grow from it. So I breathed in trust, and I breathed out fear. Fear of the outcome, fear of the expectations I had made, just all the fear that surrounds us all the time. And on my 3rd breath, I breathed in commitment, a promise to myself that I was going to jump, that I would be determined and strong and powerful enough to do this. And so I took in my last breath, I held it for a second, and I jumped. And I remember how cold the water was and how happy I was and the way the sun felt when you pop out for the first time. And I remember how beautiful it was and how 3 breaths got me off that cliff and into the water. And I ended up using that technique all throughout my life. And it's gotten me through everything from my first kiss to being trapped on the top of a mountain with 30 minutes of sunlight and deciding to take a dried riverbed home, which worked. But it hasn't just been physical boundaries. It's been a lot of emotional ones. It's been a lot of conversations we're all afraid to have, a lot of sentences and words that play over and over again in our heads, but we're too afraid to say. And I found they're usually centered around 3 things. And those are, I'm sorry, goodbye, and I love you. We don't say them because we don't know the outcome, and we fear the unknown. Just like it's terrifying to jump off the cliff because you don't know exactly how high it is and what it's going to feel like when you hit the water. But I promise you that if you take these 3 breaths, you will learn something from it. And not always good, as I said before, but always necessary. I remember one time in particular, I was talking to someone who's of utmost importance to me, and I remember looking into their eyes and thinking, I should just tell you how I feel and how I felt and everything. So I took my 3 breaths. I breathed in the present moment. I breathed out distraction. I breathed in trust. I breathed out fear. I breathed in commitment. And I opened up for the first time. And the person's reply was, you were trying to hurt me, you were cruel, and I give up on you. And it was exceedingly painful, and I wanted nothing more than to crawl back into my comfort zone and never come out. I hated my 3-breath technique, and I promised myself I would never use it again. But looking back on it, it was exactly what I needed to hear. And it made me into the strong and independent and capable person that I am today. A few summers ago, I was with my brother back in Lake McGunnicook, and we were driving on the boat. And I remember we turned around this bend with all these beautiful trees, and I saw this big cliff that nobody had ever jumped before and nobody had ever seen before. And I told my brother to stop the boat, and he did. And I asked how deep the water was. And he said it was about 36 feet. I said that was perfect. And I dove off the bow, and I swam all the way to the edge. And I climbed up the cliff, and to swing my leg around this tree and shimmy across the side. But I made it up to the jet on the edge, and I grabbed this dead tree that was sticking out of it, and I looked out at my brother and at the lake and at this place I've been lucky enough to call home, and I took my 3 breaths. I breathed in the present. I breathed out all my fears, all my worries about the past and the future and everything. I breathed in trust. I breathed out fear. I breathed in commitment and power and strength, and I gripped the edge of the cliff with my toes, just like I'd done when I was little, and I jumped. And the fall was so much more terrifying than the one I'd done when I was little. I was 30 feet above the ground, and my heart jumped into my throat, and my stomach was twisting, and my legs flailed, and when I hit the water, it slapped my knees, and it hurt. And I sunk all the way down to the bottom, and I remember feeling the silt on my toes and opening up my eyes underwater, and everything was in that sepia kind of brown color that it looks like when you swim underwater and you open your eyes. But I remember coming out from the surface of the water for the first time and just breathing, taking that final, what is it, an inhale? I don't know how to speak. Final inhale after you've made that leap of faith. I remember looking up at the sun and at my brother and at Lake McGunnicook and just thinking that all the leaps of faith I've made in my life have brought me to this exact moment. And it's been painful, and it's been beautiful, and it's been everything I've done. And it's all happened with 3 carefully placed breaths with a little meaning behind it. So I'll leave you today with a cliche and a question. We're all standing on the edge of a cliff in our lives, and we have 2 choices. We can either take the path we took to get here, which you know will take you home safe and you'll be fine, or you can jump, and you don't know what it's going to be like. And I'm not going to tell you it's going to be great. It might hurt, but you will never learn something on the path back home, and you will learn everything just a little bit outside your comfort zone. So I dare you to take 3 breaths. Breathe in the present, breathe out the past. Breathe in trust, breathe out fear, breathe in commitment. And I dare you to take a leap of faith. Thank you.